Dragon Ball Daima episode 2. Came into this one expecting something kinda crazy like last week, a Garlic Jr. arc Krillin jaw on the ground moment, so first impressions had me like, it still looked cool. It's got some animation by Yuya Takahashi, how could it not? He's actually the chief animation director for this one, so that gets a thumbs up. If you're expecting him to go full Boo arc like he did in Super, well he doesn't. It's very on model. Now first part, yeah, I'll leave that till later, because I want to start on a positive note. Takumi Yamamoto. He did a lot of work on the last episode, happy he's back, and like last week, he brings that bouncy energy. Again, there's principles applied like squash and stretch to Krillin's head, humor through animation, the mini airwalk, time that on 2s, so a new drawing every 2 frames, then speed it up by changing to 1s as he runs off. Cool style to the effects animation. This is a type of scene that would usually just be some loop speed lines, like this cut here. But instead it's a mix of these ovals and jagged shapes. Feels more creative. Now we get the opening pretty soon after and it's fine. I like it. There's a lot of positives to talk about, which I will in 5 seconds. And I'm fully prepared to have rocks hurled at me. But it doesn't really strike that chord or fill me with that sense of excitement the OG opening did or other ones in this franchise. I hope it does for others. Reading a lot of reactions, it seems it did. And you know, maybe in 3 weeks time I'll be like, this is actually heat, what was I talking about? I don't know, maybe it's because I've been like spoiled with insane openings the past year. Like with Jujutsu Kaisen, you know, very colourful, animated, dynamic composition. It was so good I made a video on one of them. Or like Dandadan recently, interesting lighting, strong colour work, amazing framing, unique animation styles, One Piece, like top stuff. And then I come to Dragon Ball and it's like, yeah, this is nice. And that's about it for me. I think maybe because the start just begins with some CG stuff, which didn't leave the craziest first impression, and also the storyboarding, some of the composition initially is kind of flat. And don't get me wrong, the transitions are neat. Using water, then the strands of cloth of what's tied around probably a grave post. Cool ideas. I just feel like the framing could be better, like here, maybe by placing the camera down, pointing it upwards, instead of having it sit at eye level. That would be a better way to emphasize this rocky elevated path, give a bit more depth. Now for cuts like this, a flat approach is perfect. It's clearly inspired by the drawings Toriyama did on the spine of the volume covers for the manga. It's a neat callback. And Dragon Ball GT also did this for its second ending. And this is definitely a more animated and lively take, Hanzi trying to grab Goku. As Bulma talks, the animator has her rotate around. There's a variety of different poses, just a lot of personality to everyone in general. I like this cut as well, seeing adult Goku on the Nimbus, nice composition, big fluffy clouds in the background, competent design. Then the other vehicles slowly breaking through and meeting him, the feathers falling back, which is also a design element carried over to the ending. A bit of a callback to Z's second one this time, which is cool. I'm sure as we all know, this anime was made to celebrate the franchise's 40th anniversary, and so little callbacks to various bits of Dragon Ball, whether manga or anime, is very appropriate. Next cut is by a freelancer, Hiromi Ishigami. She did like one scene on Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, which had some super nice character animation. I'm sure she's happy to be working with these designs now. But I never thought she'd be back again. Anyways, little backstory, her career begins in the early 2000s, starting out at Studio Graffiti. First credits were on Noisy Ninja Show, and later working on studio-owned classics like Soul Eater. But a lot of her best work would be on One Piece and Naruto Shippuden, whether character animation or action, she's excellent. Now this cut literally looks like something ripped out of Blue Dragon, a bit of a forgotten Toriyama anime project and one which Katsuyoshi Nikatsuru also did designs for. I guess that's why. The one after is animated by Hiro Nagano, and this guy is exceptional at character animation. He's made guest appearances on many big shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, Bleach 1000 Year Blood War, Mob Psycho, and even if he does like 1 second, he just seemed to be happy to work on one of his favorite shows, which makes me happy. Next cut, don't know who did it, but very fun shape design, a good mix of straights and curves. Then a presumed Ryo Onishi. He's definitely one of the top animators at Toei. He first started on Dragon Ball with that Bardock special I feel like half the fandom has forgotten about, and worked occasionally on Super, once every 100 episodes. Now loose and organic is a simple but good description of his approach to motion, and that's very fitting here. And this style of action is my absolute favorite part of the opening. Even though it's short, It's something I wish Dragon Ball did more, and I really hope to see in Daima's future fights. I talked about this specifically in that GT animation breakdown last year, that I love it when there's lengthy continuous cuts in Dragon Ball action, and that the series' common approach to action is to kind of segment a lot of stuff, like a character will fly towards the opponent, then cut back to character's reaction, then back to a reaction shot, then back to the other character, and that's a fine approach, there's a lot of positives. But with characters that can fly, chuck ki attacks, fire mouth lasers, there's a lot of creative potential. It's why I love that section animated by Naoki Tate of Vegeta and Goten with this aerial dogfight in Dragon Ball GT. Honestly, it's one of my favorite fight sequences out of that show, and it's why I love these cuts. There's so much. You have Goku fighting guards, while Vegeta and Piccolo swoop in with ki attacks, taking on something similar to those jet copters we saw in the Red Ribbon Army arc. Cool throwback, which then transitions into them fighting this tentacle monster. And it's a pretty time-consuming scene to animate. There's vehicle animation and multiple ones at that. 4 characters on screen, then this monster. There's a lot going on. And the same for Ken Otsuka's section. The storyboard is fantastic. Seamless transitions. As Goku and Vegeta are flying away, the energy ball is used to flick the camera around, somewhat looking from the perspective of one of the Guardians now. Then when the other one launches up, that transitions into this part with another one coming in. Such a smooth flow. Back to Otsuka's work, strong posing. He's always been pretty great at that, but also the way he lays out the scene, having Goku and Vegeta switch around, moving back and forth from the camera. I mentioned it in the Z OVA video with Hisada, and I'll mention it again. It's a great method to give an impression of depth, but also energy to a scene. Jumping back a bit though, there's also a cut that's by Tadayoshi Yamamura. I'm sure I don't need to give him an introduction. Like the last episode, it's very short work. You got his big highlights and blocky styled hair. Also, Shun Sawai, he's back. He animated Vegeta's sacrifice in the last episode and that parody scene from a baseball anime. Next, Ishigami again, drawing some sick impact frames. They look very Kamada inspired. For a bit of context as to what on earth I'm talking about, Yoshimichi Kamida is an animator known for drawing with thick, chalky brushstrokes, and personally I love that style. Dragon Ball has had a lot of cool impact frames, but this is definitely in my top 10. Then a presumed Isamu Takara scene, and Yuya Takahashi. And it's very different stylistically. Two-tone shading, yellow speed lines, but also the animation. There's this burst of fiery effects drawn with these dense wispy lines. First time I've seen this style of effects in Dragon Ball, well, from memory. It actually reminds me a lot of Toshiyuki Sato's style in the shape design. Very different. There's also this burst of lightning bolts, and then all these various little bits of energy balls or something are drawn in, kind of like the Spirit Bomb. It's a very creative and intense depiction for a familiar move. Now, after the opening, the most noteworthy bit is by Yamamoto again. He does a great job visually of showing Goku's struggle to fly in this smaller body. The arcs to the motion are really good, bit of a jagged pattern, which works well because you want the movement to feel a bit unnatural. This is also illustrated through another animation technique, slow in, slow out. So the launch off is slow, Goku feels confident, but when he struggles, speed it up, then slow down, then really move the character fast at the end. This fluctuation in speed is a simple way to show Goku's lack of control and portray humor. Fun scene. Now after that, there's really not much to break down. In the last episode, I praised it for making the dialogue scenes engaging through animation, and I don't feel that it's really as heavy here. You do have small bits here and there, but it's not cut after cut, and that's okay. I'm not saying there needs to be Sakuga 24/7, but Yoshima's storyboard doesn't compensate for that as much as it could. I've brought up early One Piece before because it's a solid example of a show with next to no actual animation for its dialogue scenes, but you still often had storyboard artists that would sketch out creative angles. It brings visual depth, extra weight to scenes, and makes for a more engaging episode overall. But that isn't really here much. So much stuff is just at eye level. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely some striking compositions, and shout out to the background artist as well, but it isn't consistent. And drawing back now to what I said I would mention at the start, there's also the posing. One basic principle you'll find in just about any animator's guidebook or blog, whether 2D or 3D animation, is to avoid symmetrical poses. And man, are these some symmetrical looking drawings. In Western animation circles, it's called twinning. It's pretty much when one side of the character is the exact same as the other, there's no variety. And as Disney animation legends Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas would say, the result is a wooden character. And good gestures were a particular point I praised so much in the first episode, because the animators were consistently drawing the characters in fun and interesting poses, even in the later section when they summon the dragon. Nothing crazy, but like Degasu, feet apart, fists clenched, here, arm off to the side, this one, leg off to the side, other one facing forward, slight head tilt. Then you flick back to this episode and it's the same linear look again, and again. It's definitely not the whole episode, this is more of a comment on the earlier sections, because there's still definitely some dynamism to be found in other parts, but it is a bit stiff at times. However, one major difference say to Super, the silver lining, is that you have an appealing art style, polished drawings, and beautiful background direction. It's still such a nice episode to look at, even if the framing can be a bit ordinary at times. And with saying all that, I will again praise the physics for the smaller elements. You can see the hair come back up and settle a lot, or the food. Because of the uneven weight distribution here as Bulma puts the plate down, the buns on the bottom compress, then the top one kinda tumbles around. Because the main mass is at the bottom, so that'll remain more solid and compact. Yeah, pretty nuanced for a pretty low-key scene. And although Degasu is nowhere as animated this time, like in the first one, he could be formal, acting goofy, scared, or like real devious. This time he's kinda just like formal in his body language 24/7. Goma, on the other hand, still keeps that same bubbly animated energy, kicking the ground, points his little staff around, so that's nice. The best bit of animation though is in the second half, getting back to that now, and by Yuya Takahashi. The gestures, great. I wouldn't usually describe his drawing style as loose, or at least on Dragon Ball, but here, that's different. Again, great drawings. Now firstly, unique hand poses, strong anticipation to the motion, good variety of actions, goes from both hands to just one. I also love how Takahashi chucks these fun poses in, like Goku putting his hand out as he just casually spins with his right one. Then to build up of smears, initially it's mainly the pole that's distorted, with hands having some like small speed lines, but Takahashi starts doing the same to them, to subtly illustrate the increase in speed. He then gradually ups the intensity of the smears as the pole moves faster, to the point you can't even see Goku's fingers. Then the final motion, as Goku extends it, framing wise, it blocks out everyone else to give that element of surprise to the audience, like where is this thing going to land, who's he going to hit. The spacing also gets wide, bringing it back and forth, feels energetic, add some speed lines and small effects to further assist in giving intensity, then smooth the motion out near the end. Great scene, and an excellent way to mark the return of a classic weapon. The only small thing I'll nitpick is the hair. It kind of feels like it's glued to Goku's head sometimes, even though like the tassels are like flopping around and his head's moving back and forth. The hair, even the small strands, are just frozen. In the last one, I mentioned how the intro animation is a prime example of Goku's hair, well animated, and how important principles like follow through and overlap are, that when Goku kicks, the hair like keeps going forward. Even with Suji's animation of Dr. Arinsu, her hair subtly changes volume as she walks forward. So something as small as that, just a simple loop of maybe his bangs kind of moving back and forth, not too different to like this cut, would just make the hair feel a bit more organic. Again, it's pretty small, I still love this cut. But that's really all the noteworthy animation. Then finally, the ending. I was really surprised to find out that Katsuyoshi Nakatsu animated this whole thing. I guess it's because the last time he animated on Dragon Ball was close to, what, a decade now, with like a random commercial. There was also a small bit on Super, but that was it. After the first one, for whatever reason, he never returned to the Super TV series, didn't come back for Broly either. Even in the 90s, like as soon as he became character designer with the Buu arc and then continued on of course for GT, like throughout that whole period, it was like a rarity to see him animate actually on Dragon Ball. Will that be the same for Daima? Maybe, but fingers and toes crossed he works directly on an episode, or maybe even supervises an entire one. How long has that been since we've seen that? Anyways, Nakatsu lore aside, I love seeing little stories baked into illustrations. Like, don't get me wrong, big muscle man Toriyama illustrations are cool. However, there's also a lot of charm to depicting these kind of quieter moments. I particularly like this one, the detail to have Piccolo drinking water, because of course Namekians are on that water-based diet, is a nice touch. And same with Shin, apparently. Maybe that's to do with the whole demon thing. But this one's my particular favorite, Vegeta chilling on this big dude, Shin staring down a fish, Piccolo's just like, man, it really does throw me back to Toriyama's little concept sketches he did for GT. I really do struggle to like put into words what I love about these types of drawings. All I can say is that it gives me the same feeling I got in Toriyama's illustrations. It almost feels like he sketched these out himself and then like Nikatsu did the line work. And knowing he's gone now, that means a lot more. These pictures give me so much joy. And with that, wraps up the review. Personally, it was more so the writing and general narrative that stood out to me. Direction though by Kazuya Kurosawa was good. I like that there was a day cycle, tracks are well placed. I won't lie, I did come into this episode expecting something kind of crazy like last week. That one left such a strong impression on me. So at first I didn't have much to say about this episode, but you know, it's still solid. I'm excited to see someone else take a stab at storyboarding next week. Keen to see that staff list. But with that, thank you to my patrons, and thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.